Antonio Silva, a 43-year-old construction worker, was performing routine maintenance work in an old parish house on a rainy October morning in 2002. The sky was covered with heavy clouds, and a cold wind whistled through the cracks in the old walls. He had arrived early to dismantle an old shed behind the main church building. It was then that Antonio noticed something strange about the shed wall. At first, he thought it was just an unevenness in the brickwork, but when he examined the surface more closely, Antonio realized he was looking at a false wall. Something was hidden behind it. The old bricks were a different color, as if they had been added much later than the rest of the structure. What he discovered had been there for 17 years. The car was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, but the metal had been remarkably well preserved. And most disturbingly, there were personal belongings inside the car, but no sign of the owners. This discovery would forever change a 17-year-old mystery that had plagued the small community of San Bento. In 1985, the small town of San Bento lived a quiet life typical of a Brazilian settlement. Narrow, cobblestone streets led to the central square, where the white church of Saint Benedict stood. The population barely reached 3,000, and everyone knew each other by name. Clara Mendez, 24 years old, worked as a teacher at the local school. She was a bright young woman with chestnut hair and dreamy eyes. Miguel Santos, 27 years old, worked as an engineer in a nearby city. They had met a year ago and planned to marry the following spring. Their relationship was an example for all the young people in town. In March of 1985, Miguel received an unexpected inheritance. His distant uncle had left him a piece of land in a remote village called Pedra Branca. This place was a 3-hour drive from San Bento, in a mountainous region known for its mists and legends. Clara and Miguel decided to go there on Saturday, March 23rd. They planned to inspect the land, assess its value, and return by Sunday evening. Clara took her camera, and Miguel took documents and maps of the area. They were full of enthusiasm and making plans for the future. That morning, they said goodbye to Clara's parents and set off in Miguel's blue Volkswagen Beetle. The car was in excellent condition, reliable and familiar to everyone in town. Clara's mother waved goodbye from the porch, unaware that she was seeing her daughter for the last time. The first hours of searching began on Monday morning when Clara did not show up at school. The parents contacted the police only in the evening, hoping that the couple had simply been delayed. Commissioner Rodriguez organized a search party and contacted the authorities in Pedra Branca, but no one there had seen the young couple. The search lasted 2 weeks. Mountain roads were searched, local residents were questioned, and hospitals within a 100-kilometer radius were checked. The car was not found and there were no witnesses. It was as if Clara and Miguel had simply vanished into thin air. The case gradually cooled and was filed in the archives of unsolved crimes. Years passed slowly and painfully for the families of Clara and Miguel. The girl's parents never stopped hoping for her return. They kept her room exactly as it was on the day she disappeared. Miguel's mother often came to church, praying for the soul of her son, whom she considered dead. Father Afonso, the parish priest, was particularly attentive to the grieving families. A tall man with gray hair and piercing eyes, he had served in San Bento for 30 years. Parishioners loved and respected him for his wisdom and willingness to listen to any confession, no matter how difficult. The priest had a particular habit of holding long nightly conversations with people who came to him in turmoil. He especially often received visitors who were not rooted in the community. These meetings took place in the old shed behind the church, which Father Afonso had converted into a place for special prayers and reflections. Local residents sometimes saw lights in the shed windows late at night and heard muffled voices, but no one asked questions. The priest enjoyed unlimited trust, and his methods of pastoral care were considered effective. Many troubled individuals, after meeting with Father Afonso, either left town or radically changed their lives. In the 17 years after the disappearance of Clara and Miguel, several other strange cases occurred in San Bento. A young trader from a neighboring state disappeared after spending an evening talking with the priest. A middle-aged woman who came to look for work disappeared a week after arriving. In each case, Father Afonso said that these people had decided to start a new life elsewhere. No one connected these disappearances. San Bento was a transit town. People often passed through and sometimes stayed for a few days. Father Afonso explained the disappearances by saying that he was helping lost souls find the right path, even if that path led them away from the town. In 1998, Father Afonso began to complain of heart problems. He became more withdrawn and spent more time alone in his home. Nightly meetings in the shed ceased. The priest said that age was taking its toll and he needed more rest. In the winter of 2001, Father Afonso died of a heart attack. His funeral brought together hundreds of people from all over the district. Many spoke about how the priest had changed their lives, helping them find faith and hope. No one suspected what secrets this venerable man had taken with him. After the priest's death, the church decided to carry out a major renovation of the parish house. The building needed updating, and the new priest wanted to change the layout of some of the rooms. Work began in the spring of 2002 under the direction of a local construction company. Antonio Silva had been working in construction for 20 years. He was a conscientious worker, a father of 3, a man who was trusted with complex projects. When he was hired to renovate the parish house, Antonio took the task very seriously. He understood the importance of this place to the community. The work was going according to plan until they reached the old shed. The new priest, Father Marcos, said that this room was no longer needed and could be demolished. The shed really looked abandoned and dilapidated. No one had been there since Father Afonso's time. Antonio began the dismantling with the rear wall of the shed. It was there that he noticed the strangeness. The bricks in one section differed in color and texture from the rest. When he knocked on the wall, the sound was dull, as if there was an empty space behind it. The worker decided to carefully disassemble the suspicious section. What he saw made him step back in shock. Behind the false wall was a car, a blue Volkswagen Beetle, covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. The license plates had been removed, but Antonio immediately realized that this was an unusual find. Antonio immediately stopped work and called the police. Commissioner Rodriguez, who 17 years ago had investigated the disappearance of Clara and Miguel, had by that time retired. A new investigator, Detective Carlos Oliveira, took over the case. He carefully examined the find and immediately understood its significance. Inside the car, they found Clara's purse with documents, Miguel's camera, maps of the area, and several personal belongings. Everything was covered in dust but well preserved in the enclosed space. However, the most important thing was missing. There were no traces of Clara and Miguel themselves. Detective Oliveira understood that he was facing a difficult mystery. How the car got into the church shed, who built the false wall hiding it, and, most importantly, what happened to the young couple. He decided to carefully examine all the circumstances of the case and the personality of the deceased priest. Antonio felt a heavy weight on his soul after his discovery. He was a religious man and could not believe that such secrets were hidden behind the walls of a sacred place. The worker decided to help the investigation in any way he could and to report any other strangeness that he might discover during further work. Detective Oliveira began by thoroughly studying the personality of Father Afonso. What he discovered made him reconsider everything he knew about the case. The priest really enjoyed an impeccable reputation, but some details of his biography raised questions. Oliveira learned that before arriving in San Bento, Father Afonso had served in a remote mission in the Amazon. There he studied local beliefs and rituals. His personal file mentioned some unorthodox methods of working with the flock, but the church authorities did not attach much importance to this. A more thorough search of the shed revealed even more disturbing findings. Under the floor was a hidden room, access to which was disguised by a heavy wooden box. In this basement, detectives found Father Afonso's diary, written in his own hand. The diary contained entries that shocked even the experienced investigator. The priest described in detail his meetings with people he considered sinners or dangerous to the community. He believed that he had a divine mission to cleanse the world of filth. The events of March 1985 were described in particular detail. According to the records, Clara and Miguel did reach Pedra Branca, but on the way back their car broke down not far from San Bento. They came to the church to ask for help. Father Afonso invited them into the shed, offering them to spend the night there until a mechanic could be found in the morning. The priest saw this meeting as a sign from above. In his diary, he wrote that the young people were obsessed with carnal desires and planning a marriage without a true spiritual foundation. He considered it his duty to save their souls, even if it meant sacrificing their bodies. The diary contained horrifying details of what happened that night. Father Afonso poisoned the food he offered to the guests. When they lost consciousness, he performed a ritual on them that he believed was meant to cleanse their souls. He buried the bodies in the woods outside the town and hid the car in the shed, building a false wall. The diary described other cases as well. During his 30 years of service in San Bento, Father Afonso killed at least 7 people. All of them were visitors, people without strong ties to the community. The priest considered himself an instrument of divine justice, cleansing the world of sin. Especially shocking were the pages where Father Afonso described his inner experiences. He sincerely believed in the correctness of his actions. In his understanding, he was not killing people, but freeing their souls from their mortal shells, allowing them to appear before God in a pure form. The diary also contained a map of the area with marked points. Detectives realized that these were the burial places of the priest's victims. Large-scale search operations began in the indicated areas. After a few days, the first remains were found. The news of the findings shocked the entire region. San Bento, a quiet town with an impeccable reputation, suddenly found itself at the center of one of the most shocking criminal cases in the history of the state. Journalists from all over the country came to cover the disclosure of crimes committed by a respected priest. The families of the victims received answers to the questions that had tormented them for years. The parents of Clara and Miguel were finally able to bury their children and begin the process of mourning, which had been frozen by 17 years of uncertainty. Clara's mother told reporters that, despite the pain, she was grateful that the truth had finally come out. The church hierarchy was forced to conduct an internal investigation. How could it have happened that a priest committed murder for decades while remaining unnoticed? Were the procedures for selecting and monitoring the clergy revised? The bishop publicly apologized to the families of the victims and promised financial compensation. Detective Oliveira continued the investigation, trying to find all of Father Afonso's victims. According to entries in the diary and testimonies of witnesses, it was possible to establish the identities of 5 of the 7 murdered. The search for the remaining bodies continued for months. Some remains were never found due to changes in the landscape over the years. Antonio Silva, who made the initial discovery, became an involuntary hero of the story. Local residents thanked him for not being afraid to get to the truth. However, Antonio himself was experiencing a deep spiritual crisis. His faith was shaken by the discovery of what had been happening in the sacred place. The new priest, Father Marcos, faced the difficult task of restoring the parishioners' trust in the church. Many stopped attending services, unable to be in a place associated with such terrible crimes. Father Marcos performed a special cleansing ritual and devoted a lot of time to talking with each family individually. The shed where the car was found was completely demolished. In its place, a garden of remembrance for the victims of Father Afonso was created. A simple stone cross with the names of all the dead was erected in the center. This monument became a place of pilgrimage for the relatives of the victims and a symbol that the truth will eventually always prevail. The case received widespread coverage in the national press and became the subject of several documentaries. Psychologists and criminologists studied the personality of Father Afonso, trying to understand how religious fanaticism can turn a person into a serial killer. The priest's diary became an important document for studying the psychology of religiously motivated crimes. Today, more than 20 years after Antonio Silva's discovery, San Bento is slowly healing from the traumas of the past. The town has changed. A new generation has grown up that knows this story only from the stories of their elders. The Church of St. Benedict is once again filled with believers, although the shadow of the past still hangs over the community. The families of the victims have found ways to live with the pain of loss. Some have moved to other towns, unable to remain in a place associated with the tragedy. Others have stayed, considering it their duty to preserve the memory of the dead and to ensure that something like this never happens again. Antonio Silva continues to work as a builder, but now he pays particular attention to any oddities he may find in old buildings. He says that his discovery changed his view of the world and taught him never to take things for granted. Sometimes the darkest secrets are hidden behind the most respectable facades. The story of Father Afonso became a reminder that evil can take the most unexpected forms. It also showed the power of truth, which sooner or later always finds a way to come out. Even 17 years after the crime, justice prevailed, and the families received answers to their questions. The Garden of Remembrance continues to bloom, symbolizing hope and renewal. Every spring, the residents of the town bring flowers there, praying for the souls of the dead and that such tragedies will never be repeated in their peaceful corner of the world.